So we'll do a lot more talking about Christopher Nolan in this week's show, including his comments about Netflix and revealing a little bit of our own personal favorite Chris Nolan stuff.
Yes, sir.
But we start the way we start every week with what we're watching. This week it's the same movie, and it's a movie that is on most people's minds, the new Chris Nolan movie, Dunkirk. We're going to get into a very spoiler-heavy discussion, sort of assuming that you've already had a chance
to what it is.
See the movie. It's not like there's any huge twists. This is based on the evacuation from France back to England of hundreds of thousands of English soldiers. This is the 10th movie now that we've gotten from Christopher Nolan, and probably the one that feels the most tied to reality. I mean, I guess you could say that Insomnia and Memento are very more realistic films of his, but they have pretty high-minded concepts. This one, he's really digging into history, giving us a fairly traditional war biopic. But we get the grand scope of many of these Christopher Nolan movies, as well as a pretty interesting twist on the way that time works in this movie. Art, I know you had a video just recently explaining this. You want to get into a little bit of how the time works in Dunkirk?
Yeah, so pretty much, Christopher Nolan can be covering the day of a first grader, and he just can't help it, and pretty much you're going to see the movie again, and it turns out that first grader is not just the student, but he was also the teacher, and he was also the parent who's picking up, intertwine it. Yeah, it's your war movie. You got your C story, which I believe is called The Mole, because I didn't know this. I thought it had to do with The Mole, because the little, I guess, half twist, one of the French guys.
Yeah, a person that was maybe thought of as a spy,
yeah.
Or it's an English guy dressed up as an Englishman who turns out to be French, not German.
Mole means land, supposedly, in the UK. So yeah, you have your sea story, you have your land story, your sea story, your air story. Each one has different color tones that they're playing with, but mainly it's the story on land is a week long. The story at sea is a day long. The story on air is an hour long, and you're like, okay, why? What's the purpose of it, other than to be like, all right, I'm just going to mess around halfway through? I think it's halfway through when you first realize it. Anybody who says beforehand, it's because someone told you. Because we're dealing with the why did he do it to begin with. So there's no way you go in there going, he's dealing with time. It's until you start seeing that vantage point thing, where you start seeing the same event from another perspective.
Right.
And did you like it?
So I will say that I thought it was a really interesting way to tackle this. I think that there's going to be some people who look at it and say it's a little bit, it's calling a little bit too much attention to itself. I think you could have done the same exact thing without specifying at the beginning of the movie the way it does with those title cards.
I missed. I walked in 5 minutes in. He was already running. He was already Forrest Gumping it. So I missed that.
So I'm curious if you felt it was heavy-handed the way it was done, because I thought it was a pretty artful approach to tie them all in. And considering, so we're talking about, there is the story of these soldiers that are trying to be rescued, and they're trapped on land. That's something that takes a long time to play out. It makes sense that you would need a week with them. The same thing goes for the sea adventure. It makes sense that you would need a full day. And
for the on air, it would make sense not to drag him out because he's on a timely thing. So.
I think that it was a very clever way of constructing the movie to solve a problem that exists in a lot of, I think, action and just movies in general, where you have sort of like an ensemble cast doing things at different areas, and there's so much coincidence involved in lining them up. And by constructing the timeline this way, he's sort of showing there's a reason that they're overlapping like this. And like you said, there is payoff to it. So while I think it was definitely it's a grandiose construction or something, I think it was well executed.
Yeah, I mean, obviously he had it since the page. If you watch it again, you see that the way that he cuts from one action to another, even though they're completely different time sets, they're in the same timeline, they're just in different, moments in time. He does it for a reason. It's cut for that specifically. There are points that I didn't like the editing in it. Personally, I think the whole time thing is the one thing that edges out the movie from just being a war movie. However, he has said it himself. He's like, it's not a war movie. You brought it up. They ain't fighting. They're waiting to be picked up. Like,
Yeah.
that's what it is. I think you and I were the ones who had probably said it earlier when we were talking about some of the trailers and stuff. The mine scene, to me, when they all turn around, they look like the seagulls from Finding Nemo. They're just waiting there. And I appreciate why, like, understanding why he did it. The way what he had explained is, it's sort of like when you're saying a tale, right? You're speaking to a veteran, and when the veteran's going to tell you all these different perspectives, or even if you're just telling a story, right? You could say something is like, "Oh yes, we were at home cooking the chicken that was going to take an hour. Meanwhile, it's taking a day for the family who's going to arrive to get there, and then it's literally just taking 5 minutes for the person downstairs in the basement who needs to come up." But when you're telling the story, you're not specifying, right? You're putting it all into one. You're saying, "I was doing this while these other people got into like the car accident on their way." You're combining it all and it meshes into one. I was like, all right, I feel that. It's a little different when it's like, I get what you're going for, because when you tell a story, you do say it like that. You're not going like, all right, I'm going to tell this story first and then this story. You combine them all into one, mesh time together. It's a little different when you do it in a movie, right? Because in a movie, it seems kind of like a gimmick, and you're wondering what the point of it is. And
I think that's something that Nolan gets accused of a lot is gimmickry, rather than necessarily finding natural way. I personally find that he is able to do these high concept ideas in the most natural way possible. I mean,
I do think that. Yeah, I don't want to call it a gimmick because it's natural to him. Like,
there's much more gimmicky movies out there.
Definitely.
And he's definitely a top class filmmaker, just in the way that these scenes are executed. I want to talk to you a little bit about the action in this movie, because for me, I felt that the action kind of separated itself in some ways from other films. There's a lot of people talking about how immersive it is, and that it really does give you a sense of like the horror of being in the middle of combat in a way that not many films since Saving Private Ryan had. I'm curious what your thoughts were on the action.
I'll go back to that last line that you said, the immerse us into the thing since the last look. People need to relax. I don't know if you've seen the interviews where people are like, "Nolan, you really immersed me with that IMAX. You've just revolutionized. Do you think more movies will be using IMAX? And do you think you will be using more IMAX now that you've revolutionized it?" And he goes, "My last 4 movies were shot on IMAX." People need to relax with this whole like, "Oh my goodness, I felt like I was there. I've never felt that before." Then watch more war movies. Like, I'm sorry, but there have been a lot of war movies that have done that. Am I wrong? I feel like there have been a lot.
Yeah, okay, so I don't... The IMAX and stuff like that didn't necessarily feel more immersive than other movies to me. Where I felt the immersion was in the pacing of the movie.
Oh, and sure, yeah. I'm talking about, like, when people talk... Yeah. Where people
I think there's a lot of people giving a lot of credit to just the fact that it's 70mm and IMAX, and he's putting it on all these different formats. I think it's cool that he cares about all these film formats in a time where a lot of people only really care about digital stuff, but that's not getting me...
We'll get to that part. That's a whole other thing. But yeah, I'm just talking about from the fan perspective, because... And I know this is something we're going to talk about later as well, but it's the whole perspective of, you can't go see a Nolan movie and just appreciate it from his work, because you're not allowed to state your opinion, and it ends up becoming a thing where you're not just reviewing the Nolan movie, you're arguing with Nolan fans in the midst of it as well. And again, it's one of those things where I just want to bring up that when you're talking about a movie like this and someone goes, "Oh, you didn't like it, you don't know how revolution..." Relax. You're already faulting yourself because you're acting like this is his first IMAX experience. He's done it before. Let's look back at your blog on WordPress and see how you were like, "It's the most immersive IMAX experience ever with Interstellar," because he shot that in IMAX. And now you're over here pretending because you overhype yourself every single time. You want to... It's like you're insulting him while trying to praise him at the same time. I want to send you this clip specifically of this moron who asked him that. It's like you're telling him, "Wow, this is the first time I've ever seen you do IMAX," and he's just like... Are you not like, "I did this last time," and with The Dark Knight, and with Inception. So it's like this overpraise where you Men in Black yourself and forget all of his other filmography just to overpraise this one film. Just wanted to get that out there.
No, totally. There's a lot of people that are jumping to call this like a masterpiece and stuff that I think is maybe overselling it. I do think this is like masterful filmmaking, but that doesn't necessarily qualify it as a masterpiece.
If it's a masterpiece to you, hey, no one, we're not saying that it can't be. Go ahead. Enjoy it instead of complaining with other people who don't think it's a masterpiece. That's how you know when it's not there are movies that you and I like and we think are masterpieces, because yes, masterpieces are they're for you, okay? That's what movies are. They're for you. We're cool with it. We enjoy it. when you think something is a masterpiece and you spend half the time complaining with other people, then I know you don't think it's a masterpiece. That's just you not being self-assured of yourself. When someone calls something a masterpiece and you can have a conversation with somebody like, I think it's a masterpiece, you don't like it, then I'm like, you know what? I respect your opinion. You truly think that this is a masterpiece. Just saying.
Totally. Okay, just to circle back to my point about the action. I thought the way that the pacing of the movie worked, in how deliberate each moment was, in how it really draws out how much time it takes to run down the beach, how much time it takes to swim out of the way of a sinking ship, how much time it takes just to circle a plane around it and get it in your scope. That was the stuff that I really appreciated, that helped me feel like I got an idea for what it's like to go through the experience in a way that a lot of other war films haven't. The shooting, the way it was filmed and stuff itself, not as much, but I really appreciated how deliberate the action was, and how it's almost like a complete contrast to something like Mad Max Fury Road, which is so chaotic and just fast paced, and I love that too. But this is something that it was really, each interaction took its toll, and I appreciated that aspect of it.
I feel what you're saying. Like in Mad Max Fury Road, you're just like, whoa, 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 as opposed to this, when you're seeing him run down, you're kind of stomping your feet a little bit. Again, not to get to the cheesiness, like I'm so in the movie, but it does put you more into their shoes. Like, you're not into the shoes of Nux in Mad Max Fury Road. You're just like, yo, this is insane. Here, it's one of those things where you're just like, this is in real time. Because again, the movie's all about time, and you're sort of like, are they gonna make it? Are they gonna make it? Are they gonna make it? Because I don't know these people, I don't know their names, I don't know their backstories, and I know that's a complaint a lot of people have, and I can see that as well, and that's why I think it differentiates from movies like Saving Private Ryan, where they give you that 20-minute here's my backstory scene. But it's because of that you also go, this dude can go at any moment, because it does not. They seem expendable.
Yeah, the anvil is just like constantly hanging over each of these characters.
So
in a
here's
way
my
that's
question:
very suspenseful.
As you mentioned the action, and you brought up Mad Max Fury Road, and Mad Max Fury Road, a lot of the action is because of that amazing soundtrack, which should have been nominated for an Oscar. Do you think a lot of it plays because of your boys?
Okay, so. Are you asking me? Does it only work because of that, or does it work in concert with it? Because I think it works in concert.
Okay, I felt like if you take off that ticking noise, that one that reminded you, it's time. It's all about chicka chicka time. It's all about chicka chicka time. I love Hans Zimmer. I never want to speak ill of Hans Zimmer. Right. That being said, maybe it was the speakers in my theater. Maybe it was the way it was mixed. But to me, it felt like a reminder of, hey, it's time. And don't get me wrong, I like it. I love all of Hans Zimmer's music.
Yeah, I mean, that's an intentional effect. Like, we shouldn't act like it's unintentional, but if it takes you out of the movie, then it's not
so much
good.
That it... I mean, yeah, it took me out of the movie. Because I feel like it's just reminding you consistently, hey, these people, like you said, these people were doing it in real time. So, in a real movie, it would be cut a lot shorter and quicker. But because we're doing it in real time, we got to fill in that minute. So let me remind you consistently with this ticking clock in the background that we're rushing. And I don't know, that was just something for myself personally. Never want to speak ill of Hans Zimmer because it is a fantastic soundtrack. I just felt, because you do know, I don't know if you heard, the ticking is actually a recording of Christopher Nolan's pocket watch.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so it actually is. Like, it's not even an instrument. It's his pocket watch that he recorded and just played it in there. I don't know. I personally just felt you take that away from it. The ticking specifically, not the score. The ticking effect from the score. And... yeah,
I mean, I think... Well, you mentioned the ticking effect, and I think there are some interesting things that Hans Zimmer does to sort of echo the ticking effect with the violins just going like da 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 or whatever it is. Like that whole sequence with the stretcher towards the beginning of the movie, I thought was incredible and worked largely because of Hans Zimmer's score there. Like I said, I think that it kind of works in concert with it. Like score is an essential part of movies, and while I do think it can be overwhelming in some movies, I thought it was pretty much connected with what I saw on screen for me. So maybe that's one of the aspects that didn't work as well for you. I'm curious what other aspects may not have worked as well for you. For me, I know that While I liked a lot of the plot lines, there's a couple that along the way that are harder to stick with than others, or at least like buy into.
Okay.
Particularly the George one on the boat.
How dare you, sir? Don't you speak ill of Joel Edgerton Jr. ever?
Which movie is he Joel Edgerton Jr. in?
We're talking George, the kid who gets hit in the head, right? That man looked like Joel Edgerton Jr. Did you not see that?
He
looked like he looked like the most British boy I have ever seen in my life.
He looks like he should be in a Young Beatles biopic or something.
He looks like if Mad magazine was founded in the UK.
Yeah,
that's what he looks like.
Yeah, very nice sweater vests though.
Oh, fantastic!
He was high fashion for.
I was rocking with their style. Him and his buddy. I was rocking with their style. I liked it.
Yeah, I mean, so there's that confrontation on the boat between him and Cillian Murphy with Mark Rylance there, and he sort of falls down the stairs. I mean, like, that just felt heavy-handed and melodramatic to me. A heavy-handed way of kind of like teaching them the impacts of war, which did not need to be there.
To me, what didn't work was the whole, is he okay? Yeah, he's fine. Boy, you just heard the soldier say, he's dead, boy. Why are you lying to them?
The timing of that was a little...
I get why it was the whole idea, because again, it plays with the reality. You know, by the end of it, Harry Styles feels like, oh, we're losers, but everyone's celebrating him, you know? What's his name feels like a hero. He's about to get caught. Cillian Murphy, it's playing with his reality. You know, he survived, but they lie to him so he doesn't feel guilty that he murdered someone. Innocent.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of interesting elements there to like kind of chew over. So, I've heard some people saying that there's not a lot here in terms of about, like, what is this movie about? And I think some of the things that it's about, it's what you're saying. It's perception versus reality, and the experience, the way we experience things, and the way that they're talked about. But I also think that there's a very like fervent statement made on the bravery of helping others versus the bravery of attacking others. And I think it's done through a couple different things. First of all, you basically don't see any enemy soldiers on screen for the duration of the movie. You see some planes, you see things being shot at them. At the end, you see a couple in the distance surround Tom Hardy, but it is largely a faceless, nameless enemy. They don't constantly talk about the Nazis. They talk about Germans. There's no Nazi memorabilia even in the movie.
Yeah.
Even when they showed the "we are surrounding you" propaganda in the beginning. And the killing is very largely done in the background or off screen, or they show you the consequences of the bullet, but not the bullet going in. Which, for me, like, this is the most pretentious point I'm going to make, so I apologize in advance.
Let's go.
For me, just as somebody who like generally feels nonviolent and watches action and war movies and just can't get that visceral thrill out of seeing a really good kill, I appreciated its insistence on making the bravery around helping others and just setting all of the bravery around how these men are willing to put themselves in line, in front of bullets for one another in these moments. That, to me, I thought was a subtler statement that Nolan is making that not a lot of people are talking about.
Yeah, no, you know how a lot of people argued because they're very disappointed it was going to be PG-13. Some people were recalling Hacksaw from last year, and they wanted that type of, like, the violence that's, like, very, like, realistic. And I'm all about execution. You and I always talk about this. We're all about execution over everything. A PG-13 movie can be better than a rated R movie. I am one that feels like when you're doing a war movie, the realities of war are really what hones it in. And some people complain, yo, Nolan, you're just doing PG-13 because your fans are 12-year-olds and 13-year-olds who need to watch a movie, and with rated R, they won't get in. I've heard him talk about it, and he specifically said what you said. He didn't want it to be a grotesque film. He didn't want to focus on the gore and the blood. He says, you've understand, you've seen that. And I like that because he's telling you, he's like, what you want isn't my movie, you want someone else's movie, go watch that. Don't bring that here.
You brought up Hacksaw Ridge. That's a movie that's about a medic, and it's supposedly about nonviolence. But you watch it,
perfect,
and they take glee in showing you the faces of the evil enemy getting blown up. There's still that like violent nature in it. Not there in Dunkirk. This is a movie about the virtue of helping helping your fellow man.
I want to. Oh, I forget. Do you know his wife's name?
Emma Thomas.
Emma Thomas. There you go. I would say like Emma Thompson,
producer.
but I'm pretty sure that's the chick from from Creed. Like I love hearing her side of the interviews as well. Because
she's been his producer, basically co-producer throughout his career.
Yeah, which is really dope. But I loved one of the things that she had brought up, because obviously to him, he keeps saying it. I made the story because I grew up on it. Like this is a very British story that he grew up wanting to make. That it's like holy ground for him. I love her perspective of it, which is exactly what you were saying. She's like, it's not a war film where they're fighting back. It's a bravery that's going on with these soldiers who are waiting to be rescued. Rescued by who?
Right.
Us, the little people. They call them the boats, the little boats.
Yeah.
They said little boat at one point. I thought Yachty was going to appear, but I wish they you just see them all little boat, little boat.
Little boat.
I wish they focused more on the other boats. I know that's again a gripe, because then maybe I'd be on the other side and going, I wish they just focused on one. I really like that aspect of it. And again, when they played with time, you realize when they finally mention who's going to save us, all the big boats are gone. They're like, no, the cavalry is coming. All the little boats are going to be here. And I'm like, that would be the time when your boy, the BFG, Mr. IROB, our boy Rocky from our Oscar, that's what would
Bridge
be
of
when he
Spies
starts
Oscar
coming.
winner.
And he is a fantastic actor, even if I think he's conceited in interviews. But I like that aspect. I thought that was cool because you don't usually see that the soldiers are getting saved.
There's probably a whole other movie just to be made about all those little boats that went across the channel to help out. But we do get, it's a much more reduced story, and just seeing Mark Rylance and his son sort of dealing with the consequences of that. So overall, I like Dunkirk a lot, and a lot more than I expected to, because I was a little sour coming off of Interstellar. Not that I disliked Interstellar, but it's not what I wanted from Nolan. I think this is some of the best type of stuff Nolan can do. When he deals with these kinds of high stakes and applies a high concept to it, he's I think it's very much in his lane, even though it's not necessarily my favorite of his. Just in terms of him being like a professional movie maker, like this is like a really, really solid Nolan movie to me, and I highly recommend it to like anybody. Yes. This is one that I think is a must see from the summer, and I hope it sticks around to maybe get a slot in the Oscar race.
I hope so too. You know, I've been rooting for Nolan because they do my boy dirty in the Oscars. Yeah, they do. But no, I agree with you. All the fanboyisms aside, this Nolan, even if you can't hate this man. You'd be ignorant to say he's not a good filmmaker. Like you don't have to like him, but you would be ignorant to say he doesn't know how to craft something. This man, yes. Go ahead.
No one out there is as committed to making original, large-scale blockbuster films right now.
Yeah. So let me bring it back with that whole thing that we were talking about earlier. The little glimpse of this man had cardboard cutouts because he didn't want to use CGI. My man doesn't believe you can CGI planes, so he put the IMAX cameras on a $5 million aircraft that he then burns at the end of the movie. Like, this man is spending real money on stuff that goes into his budget, stuff that ends up...
I feel see it all on the screen.
Christopher Nolan's like that teacher who uses their salary to pay for the kids'
yes.
stuff. He's Hilary Swank from Freedom Writers. That's who he is. And because of that, I can say, even if the movie is not a masterpiece for myself, I appreciate the commitment that he puts into every single one of his movies, including the huge blockbusters that are studio films. It is very rare. I would say Matt Reeves is getting up there, to have somebody who's making these personal films. And I truly want to make this comparison right now. Matt Reeves has done his two big Warner Bros. Hey, funny enough, franchise movies to finish up a trilogy. He's got his trilogy. Ironically, he's moving on to Batman. Nolan left Batman to make this slew of movies that are all big blockbusters, but they're indie films. Because he's writing them. His wife's the producer. You know, you get what I mean? And because
the indie mentality in a
the indie mentality in a blockbuster budget, and that's very rare to have that. So it's like he's in a position where he's gonna get hate just because of that. It's at any point. 10 films in, I think he's yet to make a bad film. He's made a couple that have disappointed me, and I have valid reasons for those. But I can never say that they're bad films, even in his even in the lowest one, even in the slots 10 or 9, which I wouldn't put this. I'd put this right in the middle. I think it's his second best historical adaptation. The first being the biography trilogy that is Bruce Wayne's. But I definitely think it's worth checking. It's one of those movies you have to check it out in theaters. If you're gonna check it out, whether you like it or hate it, you have to give it the I don't say benefit of the doubt, but you have to give it its rightful viewing, and that is in theaters. IMAX 70mm if you can. I'm mad. Our Navy Pier is down in Chicago, so we don't have that. But I've yet to see it in IMAX, so even though I haven't been blown away by it, and I don't really feel a desire to see it again, I have to see it in IMAX before it leaves.
Yeah, I feel like it's, for guys like us at least, that's a must-do.
Yeah.
So if you've seen Dunkirk, which chances are if you're watching this you have, let us know your thoughts down below in the comments or tweet them at us. We're on Twitter. We'll definitely get back to you with our thoughts, but we move on to Yay or Nay, where we give our approval or disapproval of the latest in the entertainment industry.